Which celebrity did you meet and found they were much kinder ruder than you expected? I was about 8 when I stumbled across Stephen King. He was in a rush getting out of a limo into a building. So I quick shouted Mr. King, I love Cujo. He gave me a bemused smile and said, who the hell let this kid read Cujo? Terry Crews went to my college. My boss was his rah. And would tell us how he was just this giant football player, and here so my boss also was a 5'3" chubby redhead nerd with big glasses who had to enforce the rules. So Terry was popular and would have these cool people to his room so, and once my boss had to go and shut it down after a complaint from the dorm supervisor. So my boss goes and knocks at the door, which Terry opened, and said he was totally dwarfed and staring up at this hulking, muscular guy. He squeaked out, "Can you please turn down the music?" And Terry stared at him, then let out this big laugh and said, "Oh no. I didn't realize how late it was. Sorry. Dude. I'll turn it down." Then invited him to stop by later for snacks and to hang out with the other jocks if he got hungry after rounds. Boss said he was the nicest resident he ever had and never played loud music after curfew again. Bobby Flay is a complete douche. I saw Bryan Cranston at the Space Needle, didn't ogle but made eye contact. He knew I recognized him, but I didn't say anything. Oddly later that same day saw him in a nearby bar. He paid for a round for my friend and I as he left. Pretty sure he appreciated not bothering him. Super nice. Nick Offerman is a gem of a human being. He came to my small college in an Illinois suburb for a book tour thing, and I was in an a cappella group at the time, and we were rehearsing in the building where he was doing the signing, and he accidentally walked in on us and ended up staying to listen to a song. Complimented us. Hung out for 5 minutes and signed stuff for all of us. Super genuine. Funny guy. I worked with Mads Mikkelsen. He is the nicest person you will ever meet. Zero ego. Just a pleasure to work with. Met Mark Hamill at a comic book store in Maryland back in '96. What a kind and friendly guy. Saw Ryan Gosling at my brother's graduation. His mom was graduating with a master's degree from same school. Ryan sat in front of me. He clapped for every kid who got on stage to get their diploma. MRT. When I was in high school, early 1990s, my friends and I worked at a golf course that was across the street from MRT's house. During lunch, my friends and I would walk 5 minutes to the downtown area for lunch. One day while we are walking to lunch, MRT was pulling into his gated driveway. We said, "Hey MRT," and waved at him. He asked us what we were doing, and after finding out we were going to lunch, he invited us to have lunch with him since that is what he was doing. We are sitting on his patio eating grilled chicken with MRT telling stories about growing up poor and working really hard to earn what he had. He talked a lot about family and its importance to him. It was pretty surreal. MRT was just the persona. He was actually a very funny, down-to-earth and truthfully empathetic guy. Every day after that, whenever we would see MRT, he would always say hi and take a few minutes to chat. And everything was always so positive. I always greatly respected him after that day. I served on a jury with Robert Downey Jr. The case lasted about a week. He was the alternate juror but took copious notes and would happily chat with all of the fellow jurors during breaks. Very down-to-earth and pleasant guy. A few years ago, Tenacious D played a concert in Kuala Lumpur. The building the concert was in was pretty small, and there's no way they made a lot of money from the show. Despite that, after the show was over, Jack Black came back out on the stage and just chatted and joked around with people for like an hour. My buddy yelled out, "I love your shirt." Jack Black yelled back, "I love your shirt. Trade me." Then he took off his shirt and threw it to my buddy, who threw his shirt to Jack Black. Jack Black threw my friend's shirt back after pretending to try it on. My friend is much thinner than Black. Haha. And then told him to keep his shirt from the concert. It was a great experience. Edit. I met Penn and Teller in Nick when they did some Nick shows one year. They had a meet and greet and I got to meet both of them. I was kinda starstruck because I was a big fan. But they were super cool about it. And it was really weird for Teller to talk to me. Also, Teller isn't short. Penn is just dang huge. Brad Pitt is a top-notch guy in real life. I met him in Malta while he was filming Troy. I was guiding a group of students as a group leader on a holiday trip and we saw Pitt just walking out of a cafe. He took time to take lots of pictures with all the kids and was really nice to everyone. Among my group were a bunch of teenage girls who almost fainted. Hilarious day all around. Second-hand story. A friend worked at the Reagan Library and Adam Sandler visited with his kids. She said he was really friendly and super accommodating with fans. He only asked they not bother or photograph his kids. Which is totally fair. Was at the Blue Lagoon in Iceland and someone floated by me that I recognized but couldn't put a name to. I kept stealing glances at him to try and figure out who he was. When I finally figured out it was Ryan Gosling, he must have seen the realization on my face. Because he smiled at me, winked, and put his finger over his lips in a SHHHH gesture. I think no one else had recognized him. He had a full beard. Left him alone. As you do. But I'll always remember that wink. I'd give anything to be winked at by Ryan Gosling. Sally Ride. The first American woman in space. Semicolon. I was in the 4th grade and I had a science project to do. My mom found out that Sally Ride would be in the Tri-State area giving a lecture on her experiences as an astronaut. There were Q&A cards that were given at the beginning of the show and my mom filled them out without me knowing. She wrote what would be the most interesting opinion fact you could give a 4th grader who is doing a science project. She answered how she believed that there is no way we, humans, are alone in the galaxy. After the show, one of her backstage guys came up to me and my parents and said, "I bet you are the one here for a science project." I was pretty much the only kid at the lecture and asked if I would like to meet Sally. We got VIP passes and I met her backstage. She was really kind and soft-spoken and my mom has the photo of us together. Brent Hines from Mastodon was the biggest arsehole I've ever met back in 2009. Met him again in 2012 and he invited me to join him for drinks at a local bar. Where we talked for hours and he turned out to be the coolest famous person I've ever met. Turns out. Haven't had many rude experiences. But I can definitely attest that Michael Fassbender was a kind man who acted more excited to meet me than I was to meet him. Very satisfied by that experience. Kinda Hugh Jackman. He's known for being nice but I didn't expect him to be so genuine and actually keep the conversation going and to keep asking questions and showing interest. It must be exhausting considering how many people he meets every day. Yet he is always on. Ruder, Will Ferrell. He's known for being rude and mean and I thought maybe it was exaggerated as people might expect him to be nice and funny and are disappointed when he's not. He was okay to me as in he didn't talk any but I saw him being a complete and utter prick to others. A friend of a friend is a baseball coach at a private school in LA. His team played the school that Will Ferrell's kids go to and I guess Will Ferrell was at the game. Apparently Ferrell was just weird. He wasn't rude. He wasn't a jerk. But he was doing all sorts of eccentric stuff to draw attention to himself. It's your kid's baseball game, why does this have to be about you? This will get buried but I met and had lunch with Steve Irwin before he got famous. Up front I'll say. He and his wife were the nicest people. The guy I was dating at the time's parents lived next door to the Australia Zoo and knew him personally. He was looking for someone to paint a mural on the outside of the zoo's bathroom wall and he and his wife Terry met with me to look at my art. We ate meat pies and chatted. I had just moved to Oz from the US and so had Terry, so we talked about that experience. Afterward, he let us walk around the park and play with all the baby roos and wallabies. It was really awesome and I was super sad when he died. Weird Al. We got to do a meet and greet with him after a long show, and this guy works his ass off in his shows, multiple costume changes and never stops moving. He was exhausted but took the time to chat with me about places to buy the kind of zoot suit he wore on stage. I told him about a place in Seattle and he told me about a place in St. Louis. Super nice even though he was so obviously worn out. Kristen Bell, one of the most sweetest, down-to-earth people you'll ever meet. I worked at a high-end hotel spa and she came in on one of our most busiest weekends and was so patient. Most celebrities I encountered booked with aliases and through an assistant. She just called in on her own and booked as any other person would. This seems like the bare minimum. But I've had some super needy celebrity guests. She is also an extremely generous tipper. She is the exact person that she appears in TV interviews. I was in room service for many years. The best was when Snoop Dogg rented out the entire floor. It was the smoking floor. But it wasn't long until the whole hotel smelled like it. His whole floor ordered a lot of room service. Tipped well and left behind a little something. Don Magic Juan was there too, handing out backstage passes to staff. Best work weekend ever. Not really kind or rude. But I was in line for Ron Perlman's autograph and I heard him tell his staff at least 3 times that he had to pee. They kept encouraging him to keep signing and getting the fans out of the venue. And he just kept on until the distress on his face was visible. He finally just said it and started walking to the bathroom. I just happened to be in his way and one of his handlers tried to get him to come back when he just snapped and said loudly, "I have to," simultaneously pulling away from his handlers and shoving me out of the way. I got hit by Hellboy. I met Liam Hemsworth at a supermarket in a small coastal town in Australia earlier this year. I almost didn't even notice it was him as he fit in seamlessly, being the down-to-earth, laid-back Aussie guy he is. He was super nice and genuine and even made an effort to thank the employees and the store security on his way out. David Beckham, not just a nice guy. But when his kids came to the secret event we were filming and some people spotted them, he came across and told the public who could see him that he'd do any photos or signings they liked, but to please leave his kids alone as they were not in the public eye and he wanted them to be afforded privacy. Good dad. Jamie Lee Curtis. We chatted about cameras for ages before I realized who she was. After we finished chatting, he had a very nice Leica. Skater Christina Lenka was an absolute diamond. Playing with someone's kids on set between rehearsals. I fell a little bit in love watching her. Eartha Kitt, despite being mid-80s. She was doing 2 shows a day and would still use the show interval for a fan meet and greet. Then her idol was a salmon salad sandwich. A true star with true humility. I won't go on about the dickheads. They tend to be mid-famous on the way up. The bottom rung are just so happy to be entertaining. The top rung have nothing to prove. Alexander Skarsgård is very nice and patient. I met him while he was in town filming a scene for Hold the Dark. He told me about the project and what scenes they were filming here. Met Jason Momoa at a con a few years back when I only knew him from Game of Thrones. His positive energy and sense of humor is very disarming despite him being so big and imposing. I've worked in a couple presenting theaters, as in, they don't produce their own shows. They hire traveling acts, in the box office. The theater I worked at in college had Jerry Seinfeld, which sold out in 25 minutes, by the end of my shift. My cash out was $8. $200 in cash alone. Largest stack I've ever held. The staff had to have a special meeting before the event to discuss Seinfeld's rider. Because his rider included a clause that no front of house staff were allowed backstage while he was in the building. So we couldn't use the backstage bathrooms or the break room. We were also contractual required to avert our eyes if we happened to run into him. Most stupid bull ever. Robin Williams was shooting a film in my city. He stopped by the nearest senior home just to say hello and take pictures with the residents. No other reason than to brighten up their day. Class act of a man. I met Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, several times. He was exactly as nice and kind and wonderful as you'd think he was. I met Gordon Ramsay once at a book signing event. I was just walking around the area and ran into him on his free time. He was actually so nice and down to earth. Talked about food for a few minutes and how he's liking his trip so far. I mean, I expected Matthew McConaughey to be nice. But he was just so thoughtful and engaging. Truly a great experience meeting him. My buddy works in AV industry and has worked on a bunch of videos with Eminem. Says he is a very nice, quiet guy. He doesn't chat with people much. But mainly because he gets uncomfortable when people constantly say how great he is and how he inspired them, etc. Also says Mark Ruffalo is the greatest guy. Hangs out with everyone on set. I've been an autograph collector forever and have interacted with tons of baseball, basketball and football players. Shaq is my favorite. But too many great interactions to name. Most are super nice. But keep in mind these people are so busy. They may want to sign but have to go to their next interview, workout, etc. Don't judge them based on one quick interaction where they said no to an autograph or picture. I came here expecting to see loads of people talking about celebrities who are secretly douches, but turns out most people have had great encounters with celebs. Michael Sheen. He does a lot of charity work for our shared hometown. I had no idea just how well known he was as a kid. Years ago he spent a night bowling with our youth club. It's been a decade and I'm still blown away by how caring and genuine he was. He's always doing something wonderful for the people in South Wales. And every time I hear about what he's up to I still can't believe my luck that I met him. He's the best of the Welsh. Joan Cusack. Met her at a bar. She was really nice. I always figured Stephen Amell from Arrow would be a chill dude. But I did not expect him to remember me from a Facebook interaction we had months prior to meeting. He's such a nice guy. A buddy of mine met Jason Momoa and Ezra Miller twice each and they both gleefully shouted his name the second time. Chris Noth, Essex and the City's Mr. Big, sat next to my brother on a flight years ago. My brother can't have been more than 10 at the time and used to get super nervous and travel sick on flights. Chris Noth was unbelievably kind to him. Told my mum he was happy to keep an eye on him. Made sure he had plenty to drink and extra blankets. And even offered him his dessert because he woke up after food had been around. He was just such a lovely man and made my bro feel loads better. Genuinely awesome guy. Also I recall a comedian being impressed when he met Arnold Schwarzenegger. The man has a bodyguard who has to stop him from talking to a single fan for too long. Otherwise he would have never stopped on time for the rest of the fans to get their turn to speak to him. Imagine being so nice to your fans that you need someone to stop you. Edit. Gabriel Iglesias A.K.A. I met Topher Grace years ago at a rooftop bar in downtown San Diego. He was with a group of extremely beautiful girls. This was before he was married, and my girlfriends and I were just keeping our distance and talking about how we loved that 70s show. He didn't want to intrude or bother him. Out of nowhere he walked over and introduced himself to us. Very polite, not in a creepy way. Then he just talked to us for a long time about everything and nothing. It was very cool. After he walked away we were gushing about what a nice guy he was when the guy standing behind us chimed in and said, "Yeah, Topher is a chill dude." The other guy was Tony Hawk. That was a fun night. Julie Andrews was a sweetheart. My boss was starstruck because he loves Mary Poppins, so he went out to her table to do his chef thing and he said she was so down to earth and complimented his food. Harry Connick Jr. is also really nice. And so are his kids. They were having breakfast and his kids asked if they could please go to the pool after. And said please and thank you to the waitress. They were really polite and you could tell that their parents don't let them get away with bratty just because they're rich. Adam Levine was A. We get a lot of celebrities so we don't really care. But his bodyguard made a show of stiff-arming anyone who walked by. Gave off those vibes of someone who draws attention to themselves and then complains about said attention. The Rock was nicer than I'd heard he was. Super chill. Kind. and even signed a couple of autographs for me to give my sisters. Posted this story a few years ago. I met Gordon Ramsay in Cape Town about 7 years ago. He was at the same bar as me. I recognized him almost instantly when I saw him and kinda freaked out but didn't want to miss the opportunity. I went up and said hello, half hoping he would call me a donut or but 2 slices of bread on my head. But he was really nice and asked me how I was. I told him I loved his shows and recipes, and he offered to buy me a drink. Overall really nice man, and his demeanor is very calming, almost ASMR. I felt at ease. I hope he is doing well. Chadwick Boseman, who I met while I was working as an extra. We weren't supposed to talk to the actors, but he struck up a conversation with me, asked me how I was doing, told me I was doing a great job. He was a genuine, sweet person and an incredible talent. I also met Jeff Goldblum, who put my hand on his chest after I complimented his shirt and flirted with me for a few minutes. It was amazing. Kinda, Nicole Kidman. To be fair, this was back in the 80s before she hit the big time. She was, however, making movies then and had a profile. I did ask her what it was like being in films and she replied, "So good. But, you know, Tom Burlinson, her then boyfriend, gets all the good roles." She struck me as a very genuine, decent person. Far kinder than you've been told. Peter Mayhew. Had the luck to meet him after a film premiere. This was shortly before he passed, so he was sitting in a mobility scooter rather than towering over everyone as he would have. I approached slowly so he could shoo me off. He smiled so I went for it. We talked for 10 or 15 minutes. I don't recall a lot of it because my brain was screaming this is Chewbacca. But he was unfailingly sweet and patient and kind. As we parted he asked my name again. I told him and he held out those huge Chewbacca mitts. I put my hands in his. He squeezed them gently and said it was a pleasure meeting you. Name. The new guy has to wear finger extenders as part of the costume. Juna's fingers are at least 1.5 shorter than Peter's were. I met Ryan Reynolds before he became famous. I was in a stall in the ladies' room of a restaurant and someone came in and used the stall beside me who was definitely not female. As I was washing my hands, he came out of the stall and gave me a puzzled look. Then he got a look on his face of absolute horror and checked to find out he was, indeed, in the ladies' room. He apologized. I told him I wasn't going to report him or anything. Came back to the restaurant and scanned the place to see if I could find him. He wasn't famous back then, but he was still cute as. He spotted me looking for him and came over to chat. Very flirty and funny. We had a great conversation. 6 months later I started watching 2 guys, a girl, and a pizza place and there he was. I'm glad he's enjoyed so much success. He deserves it. Where I live it is popular to dislike Leonardo DiCaprio. I met him a few years ago and he went out of his way to thank me for something minor that I did. It really impressed me. He is A-okay in my books. Robert Englund aka Freddy Krueger. Robert is extremely nice and friendly. I'd been told that, but it was just amazing to see. Kinda. John Mulaney. I mean, I kinda expected it but I didn't think he'd be so nice. He did a stand-up Q&A at my college and I was covering it for the school newspaper. He was engaged in the interview and seemed actually glad to be there. So sweet. Answered all my questions. Asked about the paper a bit and asked if I could email the link to the article so he could read it. Plus, he made everyone laugh. Ruder. Demi Lovato. My mom worked in marketing at a venue that had a Demi Lovato Nick Jonas meetup. Nick was a regular guy and was nice to everyone but Demi was so rude. Didn't thank anyone or even make eye contact. She threw a fit because the bathroom wasn't clean to her standards. She also had a really ridiculous rider list as I recall. I know she struggles with mental health so maybe she was just having a bad day but she was super stuck up.